Hello, beautiful souls. I am Valeria Maritza here at Healing Through You. I am an infinite being of light, and so are you. Today, my guest is Meghann Dawson. I am so excited to have her here. And so, welcome, Meghann.
Thank you. I'm so excited to be here.
Yes, well, for people who don't know you, tell us a little bit about who you are.
Yes, of course. So I live in Madison, Wisconsin, although I consider myself a New Jersey girl at heart because I grew up in New Jersey. However, I've lived in Madison, Wisconsin now for over 20 years and currently live with my blended family, my husband Kelly, and we have three teenagers. Our oldest is in his first year in college, all the way out in Boston, and our
Wow.
youngest two are in the season where they're kind of preparing for that. So we have a senior and a junior. So really gearing up to be empty nesters in a few years. And then just professionally, I left my corporate 20 some year career back in January to launch a coaching business and a speaking business, really kind of coming back to my roots. I have a chronic trauma background, a degree in psychology, and I'm just so passionate of helping people tap into their own superpowers. And really, one of my phrases is just that our wounds is where our purpose resides. And
Oh, I
so for
love
me,
that.
a huge purpose of mine is really helping people confront the things that have held them back and really leverage those things to turn it into their secret sauce.
Oh, I love it. A beautiful way of putting everything together.
Oh, thank you.
So tell us a little bit about where you were before,
Sure.
because I know you went through some, some life happens to us.
Yes, yeah, of
And like
course.
how did you get here? I mean, you
Yeah.
mentioned you left a 20-year career, and I know that must have been kind of scary, like
Oh,
not
yeah,
what everybody
totally.
does. Yeah. So tell us a little bit about what happened to get
Sure.
you to that point where you decide to
Yes.
like, okay, it's time for me to move on and do something different.
Of course. Yeah. I feel so fortunate. I got my undergraduate degree in psychology.
Hmm.
And back then, which that was, gosh, 20 some year, over 20 years ago, back then I just envisioned I would continue down that path and get my master's degree, and continue on and become a psychiatrist. However, a little pivot back then, a part-time job at a trade association sparked a passion in me for adult education. And that led to the 20-year career in the credit union industry,
Wow.
first putting together professional development conferences and webinars and trainings for professionals that work in that industry. And then for the last bunch of years, I was over at the insurance arm of that same industry where I managed strategic partnerships and relationships, again, really focused on strengthening people, maximizing a team, and tapping into people's potential to really kind of make a team, a cohesion of everybody's strengths.
Hmm.
And then back in November, I found myself in a position where, so about a year ago, I found myself, that inner knowing in me was louder and louder that it was time to go off on my own. I found myself having a bit of a toxic work environment. It was the first time that had ever happened to me, and it was wearing down my health. I was crying at the gym every day. I was just feeling really lost and misaligned. And the universe kind of was speaking to me saying, yeah, it's the worst time ever. Your kids are about to go to college. And here you are considering walking away from the career that has been so like, wonderful through all these years. But I went to my husband and I just said, I have this inner knowing and it's time for me to move on. And timing wise worked out. My position actually ended up being eliminated right around then. And
Wow.
so stars aligned, and here I find myself now. I went and got my coaching certification, and little by little, I am building a speaking and consulting and coaching business. I launched a podcast called Becoming is Messy, where I share a lot of the things that we're going to talk about today. I'm working on my memoir and really just fully committed to figuring out little by little how to be an entrepreneur.
I love that.
Thank
When
you.
you said things became a little toxic at work, like was there a
Yeah.
change of like management or something that began to make things more
Yeah,
difficult?
yeah. So I got promoted into a team,
Hmm.
and I've again been so fortunate where almost all of my job evolution came from being kind of tapped on the shoulder and identified for the next opportunity. So
Hmm.
that happened for me in my last role, and very quickly. It was the first time where I just never really found my place. In lots of reflecting back, I don't know if I knew it this much back in the time, but
Uh-huh.
now reflecting back, I can just really see how my way of doing things was very much stifled. I I'm a neurodivergent. I have ADHD. I have, there's some things about my personality that just don't necessarily always fit in a
Hmm.
very defined structure. And within the space that I was working, I just felt very boxed in and I felt like I wasn't being valued and my potential was not being leveraged and maximized as it always had been across my career. And that just made me feel small. And I feel like now knowing my body so much and knowing my inner voice, those periods in life where you feel small, to me, is really a sign of misalignment. And
Hmm.
for other people, that team, could have been just fine. But for
Yeah.
me personally, my body was loudly sounding the alarm that I was not in a healthy place and it was time to move on.
Tell us a little bit more about that inner voice, that
Yeah.
knowing that you were like,
Oh,
okay, I feel like I need to move.
yes. So, I mentioned I have my own coaching practice
Hmm.
and I have a coaching framework actually that is essentially 7 competencies that I help walk people through, which is essentially a path to self-love. I find that so many of us, whether we have trauma backgrounds or not, especially women,
Hmm.
really struggle with worth and self-love, and need a path to know how to get there.
For sure.
And that framework came from my experience, born about 16 years ago when had my daughter, and I was nursing late at night. I found myself in a really unhealthy, abusive, verbally abusive marriage, and I was nursing her late at night. And I got this feeling inside. It was this deep inner knowing of a voice that essentially said to me, "You need to do better. You need to do better for yourself and you need to do better for your daughter." And of course, I didn't know exactly what that meant at first, but it kept getting louder and louder. And essentially, that became my calling to leave that, get out of that marriage and start paving another path for her and I. And so now, since that moment, I've spent so much time really honing my ability to discern between that inner knowing and my inner critic, which had been louder my entire life up until that point. As a chronic trauma survivor, for so many of us, we're so used to that nagging voice inside telling us we're nothing, telling us we're worthless, telling us that others, can treat us as poorly as they want, telling us we can settle for things. And I've just come to believe and learn that our really deepest inner knowing is not a critic, it's our biggest champion. And I do a lot of practices to be able to hear that inner knowing and silence my inner critic, which makes the situation in my career a year ago, a little bit easier for me to trust that, even though the leap away from a corporate job was scary.
Hmm.
I just knew deeply in my body that it was true.
So many of us are in places where we hear that voice, like a situation, and then we just know, oh, need
Totally.
to move, need to change something. And then
Yes.
we go back to living our life
Yes, so true.
until it happens again,
Yes. Oh,
right? And
yes.
then we have that feeling or that knowing or that desire to like we need to
Yeah.
move. Is that inner voice you felt Kind of like that?
Yes, and I've had periods in my past, so I'll share with my ma bad marriage all those years ago, and then eventually with a job that wasn't bad, but that my gut was telling me to move on from. Both of those instances, I did ignore that inner voice. I knew it was there, but I didn't feel courageous enough to follow the
Hmm.
what it was directing me to. Both times that inner voice got louder and louder to the point where I was getting sick. I eventually was diagnosed with an autoimmune disease. My appendix almost burst. Depression sunk in. It's just my body got worse and worse as I ignored that call. And then the call got louder and louder all the way through me eventually having moments where I had head injuries both times.
Wow.
With the work one, I essentially was just doing so much running around. I was doing these conferences, and I was kind of running on just nothing. And I ended up having a really severe fall that landed me in the hospital. And it felt, again, that deeper knowing, it just felt like very much like Maya Angelou and Oprah always say that your inner voice speaks to you in whispers first, and then it gets louder and louder until it hits you over the head. And for
Yes.
me, like it's crazy, but that literally happened to me twice.
Wow.
So if you fast forward to how I am today and what I teach other women is you have to heed the call of your inner voice before it gets to that point because it's not going away.
Yes.
You're meant to live your purpose and your inner voice is going to do all that it can to push you to that. And if you ignore that, it makes your day to day gets really hard.
I love the way you describe that. Yeah, because we are so comfortable in whatever
Yes.
chaos we're living.
Yes,
So when we have,
totally.
right? So we have
Yes.
this nippers of like, okay, need to move, need to change, but then it's like, how?
Yes,
And
yes, totally. Yes. And I so agree with what I'm describing is bringing you to discomfort because it's change.
mhm.
Even in my first marriage, as miserable as I was, it was really hard. I had been with that relationship for 12 years, and no matter how miserable I was, it's what I knew. And the uncertainty of the other side was so scary. However, you just get to that point where you realize that staying in comfort while I'm miserable, it becomes kind of a less scary thing than the unknown. And so you have to kind of take
Yeah.
that leap. And really, what I've come to believe and learn is that all you need to figure out is your next first step. And
Uh-huh.
your inner voice will tell you what that is. If you get to the point where you're getting quiet, you're getting still, you're able to know what that inner voice is telling you, it's going to guide you to your next step. You don't need to know how you're going to get to the end. You don't know how you're going to, eventually leave your marriage, how you're eventually going to leave your job, what you're going to do next after you leave your job. You just have to figure out what's next. And then you keep doing that. And in doing so, it guides you on your path and it becomes, I don't want to say effortless, but it does become kind of a lot easier.
Yeah, I hear you. What about people who are following their voice? Okay,
Mhm.
it's time to leave,
Yeah,
time to drop the job,
yeah,
go do this other path that I'm doing. And then they find themselves in a place that is almost like worse off, like it's not
yeah,
working out, like they're not seeing the money come in, or they're not seeing
yeah.
yeah, what would you say to that?
I will tell you, I am in some ways, I'm in that place right now.
Okay.
I feel like I left behind a big
Hmm.
paycheck
Hmm.
and the safety of benefits and a 401(k), and I'm here building my own business. And for me in this, and this is what I would tell other people too, is the other parts of my framework are, I'll just share them real high level real quick,
Sure.
but then I'll bring it back to my story. But essentially, those competencies are let your inner voice lead, which we've talked about.
Mm-hmm.
Exploring your childhood as an observer, which is just, making sure that you are looking at your patterns in life and truly understanding your journey, like putting together connections of what your strengths are and stuff over that period. Valuing the lessons, even the messy ones. For me, this is really about keeping in tune with the people that are crossing your paths in this season and
Mm-hmm.
really honing in on a deep understanding of what you think those people are teaching you. Why are those people crossing your path? Embracing the magic of the universe. This is a huge one. So for me, that was reading up on tons of books. My favorite is one called Celestine Prophecy. That was like my spiritual turning point.
Uh,
But there's plenty out there. It's really just believing in the magic of the universe, learning about synchronicities and the law of attraction and serendipity, and be on the lookout for those. The next is keeping it in tune with your unique healing needs.
mm,
So, this is lean into your unique healing needs. And this one is really staying very closely aligned to your body, what it's telling you it needs. Are you getting the nutrition you need to stay healthy? Are you listening to your nervous system? For me, I have something I do called craniosacral massage, where I go and they help address my vagal nerve. And just it's kind of like a little reset, just to help keep me at a very kind of good baseline and not a nervous system that's like all over the place.
mhm.
And then the last two are unapologetically loving yourself, telling your story, all of it, owning your messy, sharing it with others, sharing how you've learned and grown, and then passing it on, helping those people now pass on all your wisdom.
Yes.
So I'll bring it back to your question.
Uh,
So that whole framework is called the Imperfect Level Up. So that was an acronym for each of those, level up. So if you stay strong on those competencies, it helps you ride out the uncertain times. So for me this year, that's looked like, those moments where I'm about to give up and give in and I'm going to go back to a corporate job. It's those moments where all of a sudden that day, I get a somebody reach out and wants to know about my coaching practice, or that day I get just a Facebook message from somebody that says, "Hey, I heard this episode of your podcast. I really needed that." It's just these little hugs from the universe that are validating to me and saying you are on the right path. Just because it's not unfolding exactly as you thought it was, and then not as quick as you thought it was, you're actually on the exact path you need to be. And if you keep having those little hugs from the universe, like then it gives you the resolve to be able to follow that inner guidance from your deepest knowing.
I love that answer because I do feel that so many of us who take that plunge, we do go through, the ups and
Yeah,
downs, lots of downs, and
totally.
and so many people give up.
Yes, yes, yes. And I would just add, because for me, I think the financial piece of, yeah, that you had used a financial example. And for me, that is the season I am in right now, is
Hmm.
trying to figure out how my husband and I are going to keep making it work to pay for everything. And I would add, I am so fortunate that I have a partner who has an
Yes.
income. So I'll even share that for myself. I've been having some good chat GPT conversations along this journey. And even as recent as last night was okay, we're kind of getting to a place where, I do need to identify some income, but I don't want to abandon that inner knowing. And the conversation led to bridge income and just finding opportunities where maybe it's a part-time job, maybe it's something that's not fully aligned with the bigger path, but it's not going to get in the way of that path. I think
Hmm.
that is the biggest thing, is not abandoning that inner voice, but
Yeah.
we have responsibility, and that's fair, and so we have to manage that tension in the world that we live in.
Yeah, I love that because also I have spoken with many people who get to that point and they need it because maybe they don't
Yes.
have the partner who has the
Yes.
job
Of
and
course,
they,
of
right?
course.
And they need it
Yes.
and but they see getting this other support system as a
Yeah.
failure.
Yes,
And it's
yes,
like it's
yes.
not a failure, it's just a
Yeah.
step
It's a
on your
step.
way.
Yes. Oh my gosh. My husband and I talk so much about that. We actually have instituted, we've put in a Wednesday kind of home team meeting. So him and I have over our coffee on Wednesdays. We just check in because this is a new season for us with
Mhm.
me not having a traditional job and him being the primary breadwinner. And part of that check-in is celebrating the things that we've learned
Mm.
and not using the
Validating.
word failure, just validating that this season for us has been a wonderful one. And there's so many ways that it's been abundant, even though it's not necessarily, made us like so lucrative yet and
Hmm.
become a very financial strong path yet. But that doesn't mean it's not a valuable path to be walking on.
For sure, especially with the health problems, right? Because where you
Right.
were, one of the
Yeah.
reasons you left is because your body was telling you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. That health problems. I mean, over those years when I left my job, those 2 years, I mean, I was identified to have the autoimmune disease. I ended up being identified with thyroid cancer through that process. My body was just not doing well. And now, after this year, I'm in the healthiest place I've been in years. And so to be able to reclaim my health, that alone is a huge part of what this year has been for me. So, if I have to do some part-time work or if I have to find some other bridge opportunities along my journey to really build out my long-term vision, that's okay as long as I stay true to keeping myself healthy. I stay true to the things that my body says it needs.
Yeah, for sure. I love that. Yeah, and looking for all the abundant things that
Yeah.
you are already seeing and receiving. And it
Yeah.
may just not look like the traditional way, you
Right.
know.
Oh, totally. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's so funny you mentioned the abundance, and that I have a mantra that I say at bedtime these
Uh-huh.
days. And my mantra is I am free, whole, and open to overflow. The universe surprises me with abundance.
I love it.
So that mantra is just me staying open to what abundance looks like. It's still, and it's feeling gratitude for all that I have right now. And that gratitude is true. And that vibration, it just gives me a trust that things are going to unfold in the way that are meant to be for me.
For sure. Yeah, the gratitude thing. There's this person that I follow on YouTube. He talks about fasting and he talks
Yeah.
about vitamin G, and
Yeah.
vitamin G is the gratitude.
Yes. Oh, it's
And
so
it's
true. Oh my gosh. It's the best, and it is, I don't want to sugarcoat it. It is hard, it's, these days if I'm going for a contract and then I end up not getting it, internally to have that first feeling of disappointment
hmm
is certainly true for me. However, I do very quickly work through that, honor that feeling, but then thank the universe for, not bringing me an opportunity that wasn't aligned with my path. And that
yes.
really has been powerful. Like it sounds a little bit, overly woo-woo for some people, but it really has made a huge difference.
No, I completely agree with you. It's kind of like looking at the glass half full instead of,
Yes.
half empty.
Yeah, oh my God, Valeria, don't you find that when you look back at your life
Hmm.
and you look back at the things you didn't get, don't you see how those led to bigger opportunities, new opportunity, like the things that came from you not getting those things?
Yeah, absolutely. And not only that, I was just talking with somebody else yesterday, I think it was, and we're talking about this specifically, that
Yeah.
we have a vision of like, I want XYZ, and we're working towards, and it may become really hard or difficult or like struggling to get there. And once we get there, it's like, I don't really like it. But because
Yeah.
you went through all the struggles and the
Yeah.
difficulties, you found different things that you weren't aware they were even there or that you
Oh,
wanted.
so true.
And then you're like, maybe this might be it. And then that feels like, and it works really fast, very quickly.
Yes.
And you're like, oh, I would have never gotten here had I
Yes.
not gone through all the struggles
Yeah.
towards
Oh,
what I thought I wanted.
that is a huge lesson. That's one that we talk about to our teenage kids.
Mm-hmm.
When I was their age, I thought that where I went to college, the decision I made about what my career was going to be, I thought those decisions were forever. and the weight of having to make decisions
Yeah.
that were forever is just daunting. Where the older I've gotten, I've realized that every decision is the decision for that moment.
Hmm.
And as the moments unfold, you get to change. You can pivot. You gain the lesson and you move on to something else, and you get to keep doing that. So all you need to do is choose what's best for right now and then just roll with it.
That's the word exactly that was coming to me. Is like choosing. Just choose
Just
what
choose,
you
make a
what's making you
decision.
happy.
You just need
Yes.
to make a decision sometimes,
Yeah.
and knowing that it's just for now,
Yes.
makes it that much easier. I have to say, this one's a bit controversial, but my husband and I were both on our second marriages. And
Hmm.
even for us in our relationship, people don't believe us, but that's truly how we picked each other in a dating world too. And when we decided to get married, we did not pick each other forever. We both have failed first marriages, and it
Hmm.
felt inauthentic, to promise again forever.
Uh-huh.
And so, what we did in our vows was we promised each other each brand new day.
Oh, I
That's
love
the
that.
best we can do. I will promise you the best I can. And we both very honestly will say, if each brand new day leads us in different directions, it makes me a little teary because I think this is, I believe this deeply, but if our best new day leads us in growth in different directions, then we would honor that, and it would be okay because we both believe that for the better good for each of us, we have to evolve as we're meant to, and we can't know where that's going to lead to. However, here we are almost married for 10 years, and sometimes it feels like we're newlyweds because I feel like that approach has made us, it just keeps adding up to a really strong marriage.
No, I completely love that. I really, really love that because really that's all we have is the now. It's this moment.
Right. Yeah,
And you get to make your decisions now, you know?
exactly. That's it. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And the other part that you mentioned about how daunting it was to make all of these decisions as you are choosing a college or choosing where
Yes.
you're going
Oh,
to go or what do you want to become. I
yes.
feel a lot of our kids now are really aware of that and
Yeah.
they don't
Yeah.
want to go to college or they don't
No.
want to commit to it
Nope.
because it doesn't feel aligned with them.
Yes, it's so true. I loved our son who's in college now.
Hmm.
When he was a junior in high school, he approached us and shared that he was interested in a gap year and explained his reasonings. He didn't know yet what he wanted to do. And so he thought maybe if he could travel a little bit and learn more about himself, we supported that. But then as he neared the time to apply to colleges, all of a sudden he just got clarity on what he wanted to do, and he ended up like just really focusing, and he paved his own path and ended up getting into the college he wanted, and he just made that happen because he was certain at that point. And I just was so proud of him. I thought at that age to know himself so well, to
Yeah.
one, be so set on the gap year, but then his inner voice told him differently and he pivoted, and that was okay. And it's worked out wonderfully.
Yeah, I also love that he got support on that idea
Yes,
because I feel
yes,
that if you don't get that support, then it's kind of like, okay, now I'm fighting it, and then you don't get
yes.
to the part where you actually hear yourself.
Oh my gosh. And don't you think that our generation, that's so much what happened to us?
Yeah,
Is
that definitely
that
happened
as
to
we
us.
grew up, right? That's as we grew up, we did have that inner voice at one point. Yeah,
Hmm.
and we had that inner knowing. For me, when I was in that bad marriage late in my 20s, I had lost that. I had been a trauma survivor and victim for so long that my inner voice was quieted. It was gone. And I know there was a point when I was young that it did exist. And I saw in my kids those times when I would be squashing their
Hmm.
deepest knowing. And so for my husband and I, really, as they got older, they certainly don't always make decisions that would be our decisions for them.
Hmm.
However, they know their inner voice best. And I do not want to squash that from them like it was squashed in me.
Yeah, so powerful. I feel that our generation is a lot more reflective when we are parenting, when we're saying
Yes.
things, because
Yes.
sometimes, it's just automatic and then you reflect and you feel like, oh, that happened to me. And then,
Yes.
you
Oh,
know,
it's huge. Oh, I love that. Like to me, that's incredible. Those moments. It's actually, I mentioned my framework, and that part two is explore your childhood as an observer,
Uh-huh.
that really was born out of me being a mom. And, so my trauma story started at birth and went on, throughout my entire life, many different types of trauma. And so for me, I had a lot of shame tied to my childhood. And then being a mom, I would watch my daughter at the ages that I was in times that brought me the most shame. And
Mm-hmm.
it was so healing to see myself in her age and realize how little she was. Who was I to judge myself so harshly when I would never judge my daughter that harshly at that age? And that has been a huge part of my healing journey. And I share with others to do the same. You don't have to be a parent. All of us have some, young children in our lives in some way, whether we're teachers or whether we have nieces and nephews. Look at those children and really think of yourself at that age and start thinking of yourself in terms of another child in your life. And it just so helps you release shame, which to me is one of the most critical things when you're trying to learn how to love yourself.
I love that. I love that connection because also, like, I mean, we do hear so much loving yourself, forgive yourself,
Yeah,
and
it
you're
sounds
like,
kind of false, right? What
yeah,
does that mean? Yeah,
exactly. What does that
yeah,
mean? How do
yeah,
I do that? Like, what do
yeah.
I need to forgive about myself, right? Like
Yes,
the denial.
exactly. It's denial because we've never done it. For
Yeah,
many of us, we've never known how to
it
do it,
hasn't
so
been
we don't
modeled.
realize. For me personally, it really showed up. So for listeners, if this is something that resonates with them, for me, it really showed up in my dating world. Until my current husband, he's the only healthy relationship I've ever been in.
Hmm.
I grew up with medical issues, body issues, a dad that was an alcoholic who was verbally abusive to my mom. I didn't have many role models of a healthy relationship. And so for me, that looked like, in sixth grade, doing things that with older boys and really learning that, doing things with them in closed secret doors, made me feel good in those moments. And so that grew into somebody that craved just validation for a little bit. Even people that then wouldn't talk to me out in the open, people that didn't want to be my out in the open boyfriend. And so that pattern really brought me into my 20s and then into my unhealthy marriage of letting people treat me that way. And now all these years later, I realized that I had set the bar on how people treat me. I
Yes.
how I felt about myself, that was the low bar that I set that was making it okay for people to treat me poorly. And I never understood that. I never knew that until I started walking this path to knowing what it meant to love myself.
What a powerful statement. Yeah, that whole realization. I see this all the time when people saying or pointing the finger and not becoming aware that they're creating it or somehow they're the ones allowing people to
Yes.
treat them the way they're being treated and all of
Yes.
that. It's like it takes a lot of inner work.
Oh my
Of
gosh, totally, totally. And I know it's like I think some of it can be, without context, it can feel a bit like victim blaming.
uh-huh, for
I
sure.
am in no way, justifying some of the bad things people have done to me.
Mm-hmm.
I think those people, they have their own self-hatred, they have their own journeys, and I think that that's a huge problem in our world is that everybody needs to do this work, and the people that don't hurt others, the hurt people hurt others. But when we say the work, so what I mean is for me, the framework that I mentioned, that to me is the work to loving yourself. But
Mm-hmm.
in kind of to sum it up in an easy way, it's really being able to look at your whole story, your all of your experiences that have brought you to this very moment and be able to feel in your body that you wouldn't change a thing, that you are perfectly you, just as you are meant to be. And any mistake, any person you hurt, anything that you've done in your past is there for you to learn from and let go of your regrets. You did the best that you could back then. So when you get to the point that you can just be at peace 100% with who you are right now, the next step then is being able to openly talk about that And it
Mm.
doesn't mean you have to go on a podcast. It doesn't mean you have to speak on a stage to 1,000 people. What it means is that you have at least one trusted person in your life that you feel safe going to and saying out loud the things, the mistakes you've done. It just by doing so, you release the power they hold over you. Secrets are so infecting. Secrets keep us small, and you just need to let them go. So get those all out of you. And that to me is when you have reached that ability to truly love yourself.
I love that. What was coming through as you were speaking about like at least finding that one person that you can confide in. Um, some people might feel just really shameful and not
Oh,
be
yeah,
able to even like their best friend to share with.
totally.
And what I was going to share is that
Yeah.
a notebook, a
Oh,
journal,
definitely. That's a great start.
just
Agreed.
write
Yes,
it
just
in the
putting it
journal
out.
as if it
Yes.
was the person listening to you.
Yes. Yes,
And then you can
totally.
read your words out loud
Yes,
so
and
you
I
can hear
think
yourself.
very much. I feel like to me, mine started with that approach,
Mm,
so I don't
yes.
definitely agree. It's such a great starting point. I also think traditional therapy is a great partnership to be able to get so that, a therapist could be eventually a safe place to
Yes.
share your stories. That's another area you could go. But then as you're kind of doing that exercise, I love Brene Brown talks about, not every friend is owed your story. We all have friends that serve different purposes.
Hmm.
And, for me, one of my best friends is also the hardest on me. She's who I go to when I need motivation. I need her, I need some critical thinking to look at what I'm missing. I don't go to her. She wasn't my person for telling all of my secrets to because it would feel like a place of judgment, even if that wasn't her intention.
Hmm.
But I did have a friend who was my safe place just to start with. And what happened for me was, so back then, really the story, the secret that I wanted to share was that I had had an affair. I cheated on my first husband instead of having the courage to finally leave him. I got into a place where I ended up falling in love with somebody in my life, and I thought I could just have a double life forever. And for those of you listening that have tried to have a double life, eventually that just blows up, and it just eats away at your soul. And so when that affair ended, I still found myself stuck in a bad marriage. Well, now I was heartbroken over an affair that I couldn't talk to anybody about.
Ah,
And it was suffocating. It felt like it was killing my soul. Like I was in a very bad place. And so I had to make a decision. Do I just keep it inside and let it eat at me? Or do I tell somebody about the double life I have been living?
hmm.
And I thought by telling people about that double life, I thought it was going to push them away. I thought that, the person that loved me was going to hate me now. But what it did was it allowed that person to open up to me about the things that they're ashamed about. It might
Wow.
look different, right? It's different. It wasn't their shame was different than my shame, but it brought us closer together. And so for me, with each safe person I opened up to, it made me connect stronger and stronger. And it's actually what's led me to do this work. It's actually led me to now this moment, all these years later, to be able to talk about it so openly
Hmm.
because I've realized that vulnerabilities and being able to share the things that hurt us most, that we've hurt other people most, getting it out there, it connects us. It makes us closer together. And I think we need more of that in our world.
100% with that. It's so interesting because I was last night I was getting this download. I was thinking about high school, right? And the high
Mhm.
school kids, how, they're in that age where the whole world is their social stuff,
Yeah,
right?
yeah,
And any
totally.
little thing that can happen is like death. And everybody thinks that their parents are the worst or that they
Yeah.
have the worst this or whatever. And how each kid brings that and carries that within themselves, thinking that they're
Yes.
the only one.
Right. You think you're the only one. I know it's so true. And if you never speak to that,
Yes.
I mean, I feel like you just nailed it. I think that is the message that's holding so many people back. And what happens then is that in that situation, and I was there in that situation for most of my life. I was
Hmm.
that person with that kind of double life where out in the world I was a straight A perfectionist, behind the scenes I was like every boyfriend was cheating on their girlfriend with me, and so I had that feeling like I was inherently bad. I was a bad person, and that feeling of being a bad person just carried deep within me, and it just made me kind of rot from the inside out. And then here, all these years later, as I talk to people, we all have things that we had to learn and grow from. And to be honest, most of the things I would say that I considered those bad things are the things that I've actually learned from the most.
Yeah.
I mean, that's kind of my third step in my competencies is
Hmm.
value the lessons, even the messy ones.
Hmm.
So if you look back and all of your things that brought you shame, if you instead of you think of gosh, why did I do that? Instead think of, gosh, what did that teach me? It just turns it on its head and it helps you realize that, we're all flawed. We're all gonna mess up in some way or another. And if you can learn from that, that's what propels you into your highest self.
That's the awareness, right? Because if we don't become aware, if we don't face it and say, "Hey, what did I learn from that?" then
Yeah.
we're just repeating it
We just
in
repeating it.
different ways.
Yeah, it's
Yes.
totally. I think I feel like you're just totally solving so much of what I think the purpose of life is, which I think is, so my framework is called the imperfect level up, right?
Uh-huh.
And I have the word imperfect in front of it because it's not a one and done. It's
Hmm.
not a linear, these are
Yeah. It's not a
competencies
box.
that it's not a box. It's just they're tools for you to consider. So I'm actually working on an assessment to help you identify, right now in your life, which of those competencies is strongest and which do you need to maybe do some work on, because those are all tools to help you navigate your next life challenge.
Oh,
And
that's so
you're get
helpful.
another one, right? So for me, much of my life challenge was not loving myself and letting boys and men treat me like shit. That was like a
Hmm.
man, that was most of my life's problem. Once I finally tackled that and faced it front on and owned it, other challenges came. Then my health, through something, and then it's like, then my job started deteriorating and I was making, poor things there. It's just like there's always something that's a challenge. And if you ignore it, it's just going to keep happening in different ways. But if you tackle it, you just level up and then you get another life challenge to have to solve.
I love that. I love that you're creating these tools because I do feel that people are like, well, how do I
How?
figure it out,
Yes,
right? And
yes,
so
yes,
the
yes.
guidance, having that person to help you, to guide you, and like, hey, this
Yes.
is a tool, and then being taught the tool. How do I
Yes.
use it? Yes, I love
Yes.
that.
Yes. And don't you find in your work, so what I have found with these tools, it gets to the how, but not in the ways that people are essentially looking for the how. When
Hmm.
people say how, they want to know the tactical roadmap steps.
They want a recipe.
They want a recipe of things to do.
Yes.
These tools are how to be.
Mhm.
These tools are how you own your internal world and you own the vibration of your energy. And if you do that, the recipe will unfold for you. But that's going to look different for everybody.
Like your fingerprint.
Like your fingerprint, your finger, and so it's like it's not going to be the same for you as it is for me. And so,
Uh-huh.
and anybody that tries to give you that recipe, I think that I call bullshit on that. They don't know your specific purpose and journey.
Yeah, absolutely. Somebody was saying there was a really fast short that I saw and he said like ask the weird question and this guy is going, okay, if I see blue, how do I know that the blue you see is the same blue I see?
It's so true. It's a good, right?
Right?
Isn't that fascinating?
Like how do
Yes.
I know? Like are
Yes.
you seeing actually what I see? Like is it?
Yes. Oh, I think of that a lot with food. Like
Mhm.
I'm a big foodie. I'm a tourist, which is,
Me too.
notorious. Oh, of course, we have so much in common,
Yeah.
but I just love savoring food,
Hmm.
and it's like the things that are my favorites. I can't believe when somebody doesn't like it. It's just
Uh-huh.
like, and it's just like think of every experience in our day to day is like that, where
Yes.
we can't describe things from the same vantage point because it's impossible.
Yeah, I love it. I love all of that. Yeah, especially it's just geared to you and you have to figure it out. It's
Yes.
I'm not giving
Totally.
you like, and this is
Yeah.
this is how we learn, like I always tell people, and I tell my son, like, these are you're learning things, like he's in school now, so like you're
Yeah.
learning things. You take
Yes.
that and then you make it fit you. How
Yes.
does it
Yes.
change you? How does it help
Yes.
you evolve? It's
Totally.
not the same for everyone.
Oh my gosh, it's so true. It's so neat. I feel like the other people in my life that I've met that also have a coaching framework.
Hmm.
I feel like everybody I've met that has a coaching framework. It was born out of their personal experiences. And when it's coming to you, it feels like, the universe is like speaking to you and telling you how to live life. And, so you start now and then you put it in your words. So I shared earlier
Yes.
what my level up stands for.
Hmm.
That's in my words. But when I've done podcasts before, so many others have said to me, "Oh my gosh, that's exactly my framework, but I
Hmm.
call it this." I was
Yes.
on a call with a podcast, and the host was a recovering alcoholic and had been sober for so many years. And he said, "Oh my gosh, this is so similar to Alcoholics Anonymous." Well, I've never been through. I've heard pieces of it, but I've never been through their process, and so
Hmm.
yet so many of us, we end up landing at the same place,
Yes. Oh my gosh, you
right?
hit
We just
it.
call it, but it's in our own words, and we need
Yes,
that. We need our own words.
we do. And it's because we're all different. So I'm going to explain it in a way
Yeah.
that is coming from my energy, from my experiences, and is
Yes.
going to resonate with people, with a certain amount of people. And
Yes.
then you can have the same exact experience or framework, and you're going to say it from your background,
Yeah.
and it's going to resonate with different people because it's
Exactly.
right.
Yes. Totally. It's so
Yeah,
true.
I
Oh,
love
love
that.
it. Love it.
Well, Megan, is there anything we haven't touched with that you would like to share?
Yes, I think we did mention it, but I, wanted to share again, that I do host the Becoming is Messy podcast.
Mm-hmm.
So in that podcast, I do actually, the first bunch of episodes were me outlining my framework. So listeners for free can go and listen more deeply what each of those steps, so I'll say imperfect level up again is let your inner voice lead, explore your childhood as an observer, value the lessons, embrace the magic of the universe, lean into your unique healing needs, unapologetically love yourself, and then pass on your level up knowledge to others. So
Mm-hmm.
that framework is detailed in full with individual episodes for each of those steps. And so it's just a great resource for folks to go and listen and get some insights on that framework. And then eventually, I do start bringing in some guests and wonderful guests in spaces that are intended to reinforce all of those competencies. So,
Mm-hmm.
really, it's just kind of a cool free resource that folks can tap into. And then, of course, if anybody is interested in any one on one work in any of that space, please reach out and connect on my website, which is meganndawson.com.
Amazing. And I'm going to put all of your information
Oh,
on how
thank
to get
you.
in touch with you on the
Yay.
notes. So if you're
Thank you
driving or you
so
just didn't
much.
get it, it's going to be there.
Yay. Well, perfect.
Yeah, amazing. Well, this went really fast. I
Yeah, it
had so
did. I
much
could talk
fun.
to you all day. I know.
It was such a great conversation. Well, thank you again for sharing your story and how you help people and, all the things, especially your podcast with all of the framework in there that people can just get in there and learn it themselves. See how it
Awesome.
resonates for them.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, you're welcome. And with that, we'll talk to you next time. Bye bye.